All right, hey everyone, and finally back after a little time away. We're here for episode 12 of the Athletics for Life podcast. So I had a little bit of time off to think about what I wanted to do for this episode. And the good news is I came up with a ton of topics. That means I'm going to have a lot to talk about in upcoming episodes, not just this one. Bad thing because there's so much that I wanted to talk about all right now that I had to sit and sift through and see which I wanted to talk about first. But believe me, we're going to get to everything. It's just going to be a matter of time. So that leads me to the first little tangent of this episode, because I'm sure there's going to be many. And that leads me to some advice I got from a good friend of mine. And it goes a little something like this. I remember hanging out with him one day, and he had said to me, "Mike, there's wisdom and a lesson to be learned from everyone you come across. That lesson may be in the form of what to do or what not to do. That person probably doesn't even know they're going to be giving you this lesson or this advice. But when people speak, truly listen to what they're saying, because there's always something to take away from each conversation you have with someone, no matter who they are." So pretty much what this means is that regardless of who someone is or what they do or what they've done, anytime someone talks, make sure that you're really listening to them. I bring this up for this podcast because it's going to be all encompassing in the terms of, we're going to talk a little bit about Crohn's and Colitis Awareness Month, which is November. We're going to talk a little bit about Movember, and then a little bit of a story that I'm going to bring up, and a little bit of future direction of mine. Now, I say this quote because when we get to the story part, it's my personal story, but I think anytime I tell a personal story on this podcast, there's a lesson to be learned. Even if I don't even know what it is at the time, all you gotta do, you gotta think about it. You gotta critically think. Sometimes in life, the answer's not always going to be there. Like I said, I might not even know I'm giving the lesson or the advice. I'm just sharing either a funny, a sad, or a down-to-earth story. So take it for what it's worth. So with that going in mind, it doesn't just apply to me. Think about when you're out having your day-to-day conversations. A lot of people, they like to think, oh, this person's successful, I have something to learn from them. What they don't think, though, is what about the people that have lived, have failed, and then have come back to succeed? They might not even have succeeded yet. They might just be in the process of just coming out of that failure. There's stuff to learn from these people as well. Just because someone isn't successful doesn't mean they don't have anything to teach you. I guess the most important thing here is that you don't have to experience everything in life to get a lesson from it. Learn from other people's experiences, because there's no way you're going to live every single experience, every single possibility. That doesn't mean that you can't learn about every single possibility. For example, what I do is when I'm not in school, when I'm not working, when I'm not writing, I'm usually reading. And it's not always just fiction books. I'm a big fan of biographies, autobiographies, because I like to know what successful people have done, how they accomplished it. Most of the time, they're not even always successful. So, for example, I'm reading a book on Julius Caesar right now. And from what I knew before I started reading this book was, he was highly successful. He became the ruler of Rome. But what we don't know is all the little failures that plagued him along the way. How at one point he was so in debt he didn't know what to do, and was able to bounce back from it to become one of the richest men in Rome. So stuff like that. You don't really know someone's full story. But like I said, you can always learn from something that they say. Or you just dive deeper into the story and you'll learn something. So like I said, that was a bit of a tangent, but let's get back on track. So after thinking long and hard about what I wanted to focus on in this podcast, I decided it'd be a good one for like a what's going on lately podcast. The future podcasts are going to be really informative. I didn't want to dive into that just yet because there's a lot going on recently, and I think it's important to talk about. So let's dive in. I kind of alluded to it already. I really want to focus on the month of November. It's a big one, especially for me. If you've heard the other podcasts, you know that I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. So anything colitis related, I'm going to jump on that and support whatever's going on. So November has kind of been deemed Crohn's and Colitis Awareness Month. I have mixed feelings about that because it seems like every month is claimed, and there's a couple months that are claimed by various different causes. So November is one of those months. You have Crohn's and Colitis awareness, and then at the same time you have the infamous Movember event. So it's give and take, but it is what it is. So we're going to talk about both today. So you'll notice if you're watching this one, this is our first video podcast. I'm going to turn the camera in a second away from the microphone. You're going to witness a glorious handlebar mustache. So we will be talking about Movember, and I'm going to get into that as well. So as you can see, glorious handlebar mustache of what I can grow. To be honest, I've tried to do Movember countless years, and I looked like a high schooler with barely any peach fuzz on my upper lip. So this is the first year I could actually do it, and it would be noticeable. But before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit Crohn's and Colitis Awareness Month. And I want to spend some time going over some quality background information on these two diseases, because I don't think we've really talked about it in depth. So I think now's a good time, especially with it being November. So very quick, I'm going to get a little deep into the physiology of the two diseases. I'm not going to go really crazy with the information. Probably save that for another time, maybe for a different style of podcast if we ever get there. But I'll give you a brief overview. So what I'm talking about right now is Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. So these two diseases, they're typically classified as inflammatory bowel disease. They're both autoimmune diseases, meaning that it's your own immune system that's attacking your organs and causing them damage. So it's tricky because there's, as far as we know, I got to say that because we don't always know everything. But it's ironic because it's our own bodies that are attacking ourselves and causing this damage, and there's no real reason for it. So I think I've mentioned this before, but with ulcerative colitis, the immune system is attacking the colon and the large intestine. So it's basically the lower portion of your digestive tract. The immune system attacks these organs and causes ulcers to form. Now this is the tricky part of thinking about it. So think about your intestine. The layer, technically the innermost layer, so superficial layer, that's what gets caused, or that's what is damaged in ulcerative colitis. So with these ulcers, it can be painful, but there's also some other pretty uncomfortable symptoms. So abdominal pain is obviously the biggest one, but other symptoms include cramping, the urge to use the bathroom immediately, and when I say immediately, it means like now. So when I'm symptomatic, I don't have that option of being on the highway and being like, oh, we'll wait till the next bathroom break. It's like, nope, we gotta find one now. But the scariest symptom of all is blood when you go to the bathroom. And to be honest, it was that symptom that drove me to the doctors, because honestly, I thought I was dying. Now let's just touch a little bit on Crohn's disease. So while it's similar to ulcerative colitis, it is, in my opinion, the uglier cousin of ulcerative colitis. So what I mean by this is that Crohn's disease can affect the entire digestive system from the mouth all the way to your butt. So whereas ulcerative colitis is continuous inflammation, so that means it comes in one large patch that's unbroken of inflammation. So think of like when you get a rash. Sorry, I can't talk today apparently. But think about when you get a rash. Usually when they form continuously, so they're all connected, and it spreads like that. So it's not a rash, but you can think of ulcerative colitis like that kind of pattern. Crohn's can be what's called discontinuous. So it's the equivalent of, like, say you're running down a steep hill and you trip and fall, and you basically skid across the ground down the hill. you're not going to have one large scab that goes from your toes to your head, but you're going to have the patches where you hit the ground. That's kind of like what happens in Crohn's disease. So these ulcers just kind of pop up anywhere. So they can be anything. So you can have ulcers in your mouth and at the same time have ulcers in your large intestine. And like I said, they're not connected. So it's not like there's ulcers all in between those. But either way, what's most important to distinguish here is that Crohn's disease is the entire digestive tract, ulcerative colitis, just that large intestine and lower. So what makes matters worse, though, is the inflammation and ulcers in Crohn's disease don't just affect that innermost layer, but it goes deeper into the tissue. So if you think of like a pipe, if you think of, this is a really bad analogy. I'm almost disgusted with myself for thinking of it. But think of a pipe and you have water running through the middle of it. Now, eventually you might get rust or iron buildup in that pipe. It's not going to go very deep or go all the way through the pipe. That's basically ulcerative colitis. So now if you think, let's say you throw a rock down that pipe and it starts chipping away at the tube and it goes deep and causes like almost like an impact crater, for lack of a better term. That's like Crohn's disease. I'm sorry for the visuals, but that's the best I can think of right now. So I kind of refer to these ulcers as deep ulcers. Furthermore, the symptoms for Crohn's disease are similar to those of colitis. I would assume that the pain experienced by Crohn's disease is probably a little worse than colitis. I mean, those ulcers are deeper, they're bigger, and they can go all over the digestive system, so that can't be pleasant. But one thing I forgot to mention. With both of these diseases, although they're digestive tract diseases, they don't just stay in the digestive system, if that makes sense. So you can have symptoms and problems all across your body. So for example, you can experience like an iron deficiency, joint pain, and there's a few other symptoms that aren't so nice. But yeah, so that's basically Crohn's and colitis in a nutshell. If you want more information, I mean, you can go to their website. I think it's crohnsandcolitis.ca. They have a lot of good info right there. But yeah, so that's it for my lesson about it. The only other thing I want to mention about these two diseases, it's probably the worst part about having one of these two diseases, is that collectively we don't know what causes these diseases, and we also don't have cures for these diseases. And I always think that it's sad because the rate of diagnosis of Crohn's and colitis, they're going up, and especially the diagnosis of kids. And it kind of breaks my heart because these kids, they're growing up. There's no cure. They have to just live with their symptoms. And I've met a few kids, pretty strong-willed kids, I gotta say, but they're on some pretty heavy-duty medication, and they're facing this thing for life. And I think it's every 5 to 8 weeks they gotta go sit in an infusion clinic for 4 hours, or go to sick kids and sit in that hospital bed overnight and receive their medication. And speaking from experience, the side effects of these medications aren't so nice. So it kind of strives me to continue my quest to see how much physical activity and nutrition and fitness and sports, how all that kind of stuff can help mitigate these symptoms and hopefully improve people's lives. Because I just think if I had this disease as a kid, like, that's got to be hard. So anything we can do to help people suffering from these diseases, like, I just want to help them all, if that makes any sense. But I think you get the point there. So with that being said, as the month comes to a close, because I know we're just about done November at this point, I just want you guys to keep these people in mind. It's tough to live with inflammatory bowel disease, but that being said, it's tough to live with any disease. So I just wanted to give a shout out to anyone who's fighting a disease, and you know, these people that can still keep a smile on their face and act like nothing wrong. You guys have my greatest respects. You guys are the warriors. Keep doing what you're doing and keep inspiring us all, because I know the only reason that I'm here talking and doing what I do is because someone was an example for me. So I hope that either I can be an example for someone else, or I can direct people in the direction of examples of their own, if that made any sense. I don't really know. Okay, so enough about that. I got a few more things I want to talk about. Okay, so next up on the list, the infamous Movember. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm sure most of you guys are aware. But I figured since I am sporting the ridiculous handlebar mustache, it was worth bringing up. So I am collecting donations for Movember for this year. I haven't done it in the previous years, like I said. I've always had difficulty growing facial hair, but this year apparently is different. So I thought I'd look ridiculous. Oh, see, I can't talk today. I'd look ridiculous, sport the ridiculous mustache, go out in public with it, and just raise awareness for, I guess it's the male-centered or male-based cancers, so prostate and testicular cancers. But I also found out this year when I went on the site that they're also raising mental health awareness as well, which I thought was really cool. My master's degree, my thesis for it, centers around mental health. So it's just really cool to see that the community as a whole is opening up and breaking down that stigma surrounding mental health. And we're trying to figure out and understand mental health and prevent the issues that can happen with it. Because, at least in my opinion, we spend a lot of time on our physical health, disease prevention, I guess injury prevention, being strong physically, and we don't spend a lot of time on the mental aspect of things. That's changing, which is great, and I think it's going in the right direction. So anything that brings awareness towards the mental health, I guess, topic, mental health subject, I think it's great. So I'm going to try to include that link for donations in the description of this podcast. What I'm also going to do is we're just going to reverse a little bit. I also try to collect donations for the Crohn's and Colitis Society. Like I said, there's no cure. We don't know the cause. So any donations that go towards the Crohn's and Colitis Society, it all goes towards that research. So, yeah, any little bit helps. I mean, I don't normally collect donations for things, but when it comes to Crohn's and Colitis, there's a special place in my heart. And then Movember, to be honest, the whole idea behind Movember was just too fun to pass up, and I figured since I'm doing it, I might as well collect donations for it. So check those two links out in the description, and yeah, let's help each other out. Okay, so I know we're kind of all over the place in this podcast, but there's one more thing I want to talk about. This is a story I wanted to tell you guys. It's a different one. It's a classical story of failure, to be honest, and it's only been recently that I started to openly talk about failure and failing at things, and realizing that it's okay to fail at things, and it's not failing at something doesn't define who you are, but it's how you react to that failure. That's advice that I was given years ago, back when I used to play hockey, and I used to just shrug it off and be like, failing sucks, and just think it was something someone was telling me to make me feel better. But I guess in the weird way that I've matured, I've started to understand that they were spot on with that. Okay, so let's dive into this story. So it takes place back when I first started working out again. I was starting to feel a lot better. Like usual, I was getting ahead of myself. So I started to think of sporting events I could tackle, things I could do, I guess to prove to myself that my disease wasn't going to limit me. So I had the great idea of doing a Spartan race. If you don't know what a Spartan race is, it's basically like Tough Mudder, those other obstacle course races. But at least it's my perspective that they try and make it harder, and they try and be like that whole like 300 Spartan strong, that whole thing. There's a spear toss in it. I've seen videos where at the finish line there's two guys dressed up like Spartans that try to I guess, tackle competitors to the ground so they don't finish, stuff like that. But so I decided I was going to enter one of those races. I mean, it was going to be fun. It was going to be challenging. It's like CrossFit on steroids. We'll come back to my feelings of CrossFit later, as I used to talk shit about it, and now I'm doing CrossFit. Go figure, the irony in that one. But anyway, I thought that'd be a great challenge. Unfortunately, before I could even sign up, I had to just abandon that idea. So my conditions for signing up for the race were I should be able to finish roughly an hour-long workout without having to run to the bathroom, because when you're out on that course, you can't exactly be like, oh, no, I'm not going to do the rope climb. I got to go use the bathroom. I'm pretty sure they're not cool with that. I think you have to quit the race if you're going to do that. So I didn't want to sign up, spend money to compete, just to drop out. So I think it's self-explanatory that I couldn't make it the hour. But that was okay. So that was the first year. Couldn't even sign up for the race. I don't often quit. So this was a great example of I wasn't going to quit, and I was adamant to compete. So the next year I actually signed up for the race. I was going to train using SEAL Fit, which I think I've spoken about before. If you don't remember, it was designed by an retired Navy SEAL. I don't think they like being called ex-Navy SEALs. But retired Navy SEAL Mark Devine basically took CrossFit, which is already difficult, and then made it harder. So I was training for that using SEAL Fit. I made it about 2 months out from the race before I started getting really sick. I think I just approached my training wrong. I wasn't in the right headspace. I was really stressed with school. Just, that perfect storm for disease all over again. So I got sick. I started to doubt my ability to complete the race. And next thing you know, I withdrew from the race. I had emailed the organizers, told them my situation. They gave me a refund, and that was that. So my second attempt ended in disappointment. However, that was 2 years ago. And so I was sitting at my kitchen table this year, and I was thinking, you know what? I wonder if Spartan Race is coming back to Brimacombe up in Orono. For those who don't know what Brimacombe is, it's a ski hill out near where I live. And so in the summer, I guess they transform it. I can't even think of my words today. They transform it into obstacle courses, bike trails, a whole bunch of stuff. So as I had this thought, I was kind of scanning across Facebook, and I noticed that they were having a Black Friday sale for Spartan races. And I thought, oh, well, if that's not a sign, I don't know what is. So this year I'm convinced that I won't only just finish the training, but I'm going to finish the race. And so last week on Monday, I signed up for the race, and I'm pretty determined to complete it. And so that's going to be on June 23rd. So I'm excited and I'm scared all at the same time. It's going to be my third attempt, but I'm more determined than ever. I already started training. Training's tough. Like, I could barely walk here. My legs are so sore, but I'm still doing it. I'm going to do it right this time. I've decided that since I have a degree in kinesiology, I should be able to figure out my own training. And so that's the plan. Now, I haven't ran the race yet. So why am I saying anything about it? It's basically because even if I'm not successful this time, I'll try again next year, and then the year after, and the year after. And I'm going to do it until I complete this race. It's become an obstacle for me. It's become a benchmark for me to complete this race. Furthermore, I'm very competitive. I don't want to just complete the race. I want to do well at it. They time you, so there's a certain position in my head that I want to get to, but I'm saving that for me, and maybe sometime before the race I'll let that out, but not yet. But there's a lesson in this story. And that lesson is failure isn't what you make of it. So it's kind of what I talked about in the beginning. It kind of brings me to two of my favorite quotes of all time. And these quotes come from Winston Churchill. And they both discuss failure. The first goes something like this, and I quote, Success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. End quote. This is important because I fully believe that as human beings, we're not going to be successful at everything we do. Yet if we keep driving forward with the full ability we can put forth towards that objective, we're eventually going to be successful. So it's just that matter of failing and getting up, doing it again. If not with the same enthusiasm, with more enthusiasm, knowing that just because you lost doesn't mean that you're not going to win next time. I think sometimes it comes down to simply a case of bad luck when we fail. We can't control every single factor that goes into something that we do. And it makes me think of, I know a lot of smart people that have failed tests because of a sickness or personal matters. And I can even remember back in high school, one kid after a test, I was talking to him and he could barely string sentences together. And I talked to him the next day and he's like, oh man, I was on such strong medication that like I didn't even know what day it was, but he still wrote the test. Needless to say, he failed that test. But is that necessarily a failure on his part? I don't think so, because he ended up going and succeeding at the test the second time around. He passed that exam and he ended up coming out of that class with outstanding grades. So, I mean, you can't control every little detail about every objective we try to complete. For me, a philosophy that I live by is that it's not truly failure until you give up. So I'm going to keep trying at something. If it's something that I think is worth doing, I don't expect to get it on the first try. To be honest, if I get it on the first try, it's kind of boring for me. I like challenges. I like having to put more effort into it. And so when I fail at something the first time, it shows me that I'm up for a challenge. It shows me I got to put my all into it. And then that's when it interests me. So if I fail this race this year, I'm going to come back next year even stronger. If I complete the full Spartan race and I don't get the position that, I have set in my mind, I'm going to come back next year and probably do way better than that benchmark. And that's simply just because of my mindset and how I look at things. So the second quote, again from Churchill, it also kind of speaks about this, only just in a different light. So it goes, quote, "Success is not final. Failure is not final. It is the courage to continue that counts." End quote. So this is speaking not only towards resiliency, but towards, I think, just life in general. So I look at this more so on a disease stage of things. So for me, how I relate to it is, if I have a successful symptom-free day, that's great. But that's not the final outcome, because tomorrow I'm going to have to battle through it again. But it goes like that for the flip side of things. If I have a day where my symptoms get the best of me and I don't leave the house, or I encounter an embarrassing moment, it's not the end. Tomorrow's a new day. I'm going to get out of bed with the same enthusiasm, just like that first quote, and I'm going to tackle the day as if nothing happened, because, again, failure is not final. For me, nothing is static. Nothing's ever static. As human beings, anything we do is always in motion, either positive or negative. I think of it, disease, finances, states of mind, these are all always flowing. I think it's something that we all generally forget as well. It's really easy to remember when we're failing at something, when we're having a tough time. You get those things, oh, tomorrow's a new day. You just got to try harder, stuff like that. But every time we're successful, I think we tend to forget that everything's always flowing. So it's really easy to get successful, kind of relax a little bit, and the next thing you know, you're right back to the curb. And that was something I experienced. If you guys have listened to past podcasts, I talked about when I went to a wedding not that long ago, and I had success with my disease and coping with symptoms. Didn't think I had to work hard anymore, and then next thing you know, I'm symptomatic. So it's important to know that we have to tackle every day with full enthusiasm, regardless of if that day is full of success or failure. So the reason I bring up these two quotes after my story is because I think quotes can reinforce a philosophy that you live by. I know I have my little bank vault of quotes that I live by. I think everyone should have a little bank of their own quotes that really mean something to them, that drives them forward, that makes them not want to quit. Maybe in a future episode I can go over some of my own. I've already talked about Bruce Lee and how influential he's been to me. Winston Churchill's another one. It seems to be all these key historical figures, Bruce Lee aside, although according to some, myself included, he's pretty historic. But we'll get to that in another podcast. I could go on for hours about historical figures and their influences. So with that, I'm going to call an end to this week's episode of Athletics for Life. Like I said, I've got a lot of really cool ideas coming up for some upcoming podcasts, as well as I'm trying to lock down a few guests. And once I get those locked down, I'll probably announce them and give you guys something to be excited for. But I don't want to jinx it yet. I'm waiting to hear back. So until then, keep barreling through the obstacles in your life. And remember, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions for the podcast, remember you can email me. My email is m.short@thetorchgta.com, and I'll answer them as often as I can. You can always drop a line in the comments, either on the Torch site itself or on YouTube where we upload the video. I look forward to hearing all the comments. And so a lot of cool things coming for AFL in the near future. So stay tuned, don't miss out, and we'll get that information out to you guys as soon as I know it. So that's it for me today. Until next time, keep working hard, keep striving forward, keep your head up.